In this module, learners will examine critical vocabulary and elements of learning outcomes, objectives, and instructional assessment. Learners will also define the key elements in evaluating instructional design projects. There are 4 sections of this presentation: critical vocabulary, the terms and definitions needed for success; outcomes, a deeper dive into learning objectives, outcomes, and standards; assessment, looking at how to measure learner success. In other words, did they learn what they should have learned? Evaluation, analyzing your instructional design initiatives. To get in the right mind frame, let's take a moment and contemplate this quote by learning strategist Julie Dirksen. Learning experiences are like journeys. The journey starts where the learning is now and ends when the learner is successful. The end of the journey isn't knowing more, it's doing more. This quote has 2 meanings for the context of this course. As an educator, it should be a goal to help learners during their learning journeys. As instructional and learning designers, it is your goal to help learners reach their goals. Critical vocabulary involving outcomes, assessment, and evaluation. Professional standards are those standards requiring a level of performance required for a set of position. There are professional standards for most professions. For educators, there are many types of professional standards: educational leadership, math instruction, technology integration, etc. There are also academic standards learners must show success in. Instructional designers have their set of standards also. A skill can be thought of as a specific ability that an individual possesses. A skill is typically applied in a specific setting in order to accomplish a predefined desired result. Skills can be learned through training or by experience. Competency is the ability to do any task successfully or efficiently. A competency is a broader concept that combines skills, knowledge, and behavior. While competencies may include a specific skill, they are more than just that skill alone. It is common to hear competencies referred to as the how, components of completing a task. Goals are broad, generalized statements about what is to be learned. Think of them as targets. Outcomes focus on the changes in thinking or performance that the instruction should facilitate. A learning objective is a brief statement that describes what students will be expected to learn by the end of the instructional event. Objectives are what is intended, while learning outcomes are what is actually achieved. Assessment refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skills acquisition, or educational needs of students. To understand outcomes, it is first best to start with the instructional goals. Goals reflect the overall learning target, the big picture. Outcomes provide the details to translate the goals into measurable learning. Outcomes are statements of what the instructional process must accomplish. They focus on the changes in thinking or performance that the instructional activities should facilitate. Goals and objectives are often used interchangeably when discussing learning outcomes. Although they do have similarities, they are different at their core. A learning goal is a general statement that describes the intended competency and desired knowledge, skills, and abilities a participant needs to successfully perform after an instructional event or educational session. A learning objective is a specific statement that describes exactly what the participant is intended to be able to do after completing the educational session. An example of a learning goal: increase awareness of the importance of maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Examples of a learning objective: by the end of the session, learners will be able to list 5 ways they can reduce stress. Identify 4 exercises that will help increase cardio. State 5 foods that will help lower cholesterol. As a learning designer, it is crucial to do 2 things. First, construct professional learning objectives for your learners. And second, evaluate the quality of objectives to help others improve. Gagne identified 5 types of learning outcomes: verbal, intellectual, motor, attitude, cognitive. Verbal is factual or declarative knowledge. For example, recall the U.S. state capitals. Intellectual involves procedural knowledge. For example, solve a word problem. Motor involves physical performance. For example, how to change a tire, changing a tire. Attitude requires a change in behavior. For example, changing your diet to eat nutritious foods. Cognitive consists of metacognitive knowledge. For example, select a study strategy to do well during the unit. A good lesson objectives includes the ABCDs. This originally came from Ralph Tyler. Audience, the learner. Behavior, observable and measurable performance. Condition, the condition in which the behavior is performed. And D for degree, the proficiency of the behavior. Here's an example of a lesson objective following the ABCD formula. Students will describe the steps in planning factual investigation and legal research, including identifying and formulating relevant legal theories, generating alternative solutions and strategies applied to a hypothetical case. Assessment refers to the wide variety of methods and tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skills acquisition, or educational needs of students. The types of assessments selected for instruction depend on the learning outcomes and the context learners will ultimately apply their skills. The instructional outcomes, instructional activities, and assessments should be aligned to one another. Assessments are often categorized as summative or formative. These 2 types of assessment serve different purposes. Simply put, formative means assessment for learning. The results can help teachers plan instruction to help their students' current needs. Summative means assessment of learning. The results are for evaluation or accountability. Examples of formative assessments might include exit tickets, running records, student work, checking for understanding during instruction, or non-evaluative interim tests that cover recently taught material and align with the standards. Examples of summative assessments might include unit tests, final exams, teacher evaluations, benchmark interim assessments, and state standardized tests. In this graphic, several of these assessment examples could be formative, summative, or both depending on the circumstances. There are 2 purposes for assessment, one through the eyes of learners and educators, the other as a learning designer. A purpose for assessment is to determine the degree to which learners have mastered the content. The learner's performance on the assessment tells the learning designer if the instruction was effective. Evaluation examines the effectiveness of the instruction by considering how well the outcomes, assessments, and activities are aligned within the instruction and whether they are appropriate for the characteristics of the learners. Like assessment, there is summative and formative evaluations of learning content. Formative evaluations are conducted during the process of designing and developing instructional materials while there is still time to make revisions. Summative evaluation measures the effectiveness of instruction after it has been finalized. Formative evaluation involves multiple feedback loops occurring throughout every step of the define, design, demonstrate, develop, and deliver phases. The designer is constantly experiencing a review-revise cycle with multiple stakeholders, so they're constantly giving work to others, having their work evaluated and given back to them to make corrections or improvements. Summative evaluations occur after the complete development is done and is given to the client or whoever will disseminate it to future learners. Product testing is highly recommended to flesh out errors, better align components, and get additional ideas and perspectives. Quality assurance ensures that the product is the best for the clients, in other words, the learners. There are numerous elements that can be a part of your quality assurance system. Self-review is critical. Try to think like the learner. External reviewers are individuals outside of the institution. They can provide unbiased professional feedback. Expert reviewers are subject matter or learning experts that can also provide a critical review of instructional resources. Finally, one-on-one reviews are conducted with the target audience. The person works through the materials with an evaluator present. During this course, you will be conducting a peer review process with a colleague's module, session, or unit plan. So you get to actually use a lot of these experiences in a real-world application.